It's the cool story, bro, bringing you storytelling tips. Today's location is different because today's video is different. Rather than shooting in the dingy basement with the boxes and old guitar case, I thought we'd take it out to Twin Peaks on one of the windiest days of the year. It feels like a freaking vacuum in here and it's just totally awesome. At the workshop I'm going to show you, we focused on being fluid, like a leaf in the wind. So as I show you this workshop, I want you to remember that when you're telling a story, focus more on the emotions and sensory details you experienced, rather than plot. Be like a leaf in the wind. Okay, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Okay, before we dive into the video, I have to say this is all organized through Toastmasters International's Downtown 65 Club, located at UCSF Parnassus, room 118 in San Francisco. They meet every Monday at 7 o'clock p.m., improve your public speaking skills, and meet new people. It's a great time. They also do work on storytelling and stand-up comedy, so it's not just public speaking. If you're in the area, be sure to check them out.
Back on fire, got my rims and my drop top spinning. Cool story, bro. House worth more than $1 million. Cool story, bro. Girl hotter than Jessica Simpson. Cool story, bro.
Alright, here it goes.
Alright. So, this is a story about one of the challenges I had was coming to San Francisco and starting a new sales job. One of the ways that I was asked to prospect was to actually knock on doors, which is in itself pretty difficult, but even harder when you're knocking on doors to ask people for their life savings invested for them. So one day I was knocking on doors. Of course, you have to be very upbeat, peppy, and just keep a positive attitude with all the doors being slammed in your face. And I noticed this man, this older gentleman, just staring at me, which is not all that rare when you're knocking on doors. I mean, people do kind of stare at you. 9 out of 10 people think I'm a Jehovah's Witness knocking on their doors. So I just keep going, just like don't let anything faze me, knock on the doors, make my way to this guy, and then he just starts talking to me. He goes, I noticed that you're knocking on doors. I'm like, of course, yeah, I'm knocking on doors. He's like, well, I just want to, say that I'm really proud of you knocking on doors, and I think you should continue. I'm like, all right, appreciate it, thanks. So then he goes, you know what, I actually have some advice for you. I used to knock on doors years ago, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take advice from anyone, I'm sure you're much wiser than I am. And then he said, first piece of advice for you is keep knocking on doors. I was like, all right, thanks, great. And then he says, well, the reason I say that is because I used to knock on doors, and also Mark Cuban from Shark Tank, do you know who that is? I said, yeah, I do. He said, well, he knocked on doors as well, and I stopped, but he didn't, and he's a billionaire. So if you keep knocking on doors, you could be a billionaire. I said, all right, I'll keep doing it. Second piece he said was, knocking on doors teaches you how to deal with rejection. I was like, I've noticed that. I said, well, what that helps you do, which you might not know, is it helps you with women. And he goes, I'm 67 years old, and my wife's 31. He's like, I learned that from knocking on doors. Keep knocking. So, story.
Great. I think it's Adams, right? Yeah. Oh no, you said
Yeah, just give a story.
Oh yeah, okay, my bad. Then it's Richard then.
Oh,
yeah. And then we'll end with Ashley.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and honored guests. I wanted to tell you a story that I found quite inspirational. It's about a fellow, Mark Salzman. He's a college graduate, and he decided he wanted to see the world, and he decided he would go and teach English in China. So he went to China, and he got involved with teaching English there, but also as a side interest, he decided to study the Chinese martial arts of Wushu. And when he was there, he became quite devoted and practiced and practiced and practiced all the different methods. But even after a year, he found frustration because he didn't feel that he was progressing. He didn't feel that when he looked at his master, he said, I'm not as good as he is. Why is that? What's going on? So one day he decided to talk to his master and ask him that question. What is the problem? Why aren't I as good? What is holding me back? And his master laughed and he said, the problem is you're trying to be me practicing Wushu rather than yourself practicing Wushu. And that's the key. That's what we can all benefit from. That we don't seek to copy other people. We can come to Toastmasters and we can see how people speak, how they act, but we don't want to be duplicates. We want to be ourselves. Look to yourself. look to your inner strengths, your weaknesses, develop your strength, strengthen your weaknesses, and then you can be the best person and the best Toastmaster. And that's the message I took, and I'd like you to have too.
That was really great. I love how you paused like often to like really drive the point home. That was really good. All right, Ashley, great.
Thank you, Toastmasters. Today I want to tell you a story from my youth about how bravery was rewarded. And now I grew up in small town South Carolina. Summers were spent riding bikes and playing backyard baseball. But one day, a stranger came into town, and all the children of the town gathered at the library, and we watched this man with amazement as he rode unicycles and juggled a variety of objects, bowling balls and pins and anything that you can think of that could be juggled. So then, as we were all amazed, towards the end of the presentation, he asked for a volunteer from the crowd, and hands went up. Mine was waving among them, and he said, "Now this is a dangerous activity. I need a very brave volunteer." And a few hands went down. He emphasized again how much bravery was required for this particular activity. And I started to wonder, question my own bravery. My hand waved a little less intensely and started to come down. I wasn't sure that I had the bravery that was required for this. It could be dangerous and I might get hurt. But I decided I'm going for it. And my hand went back up. And I was called from the crowd to mount the shoulders of the unicyclist while he juggled a flaming torch, a chainsaw, and a sword. And from the top of his shoulders, I saw the flames and the blades and the spears come by my face. But it ended with I was unharmed and had a wonderful experience as a result of putting myself out there and being brave. Thank you.
The sword. I love it. Okay, so that wraps the workshop up. I'd love for someone to evaluate my performance and just, I mean, this workshop thing is new for Toastmasters. We've never done this before, and I'd love to see if this is something we want to keep up every month, or if we just want to do the standard meeting, a few speeches, and then evaluations. So, grade rubber, and that's actually invented at Lowell High School. So, SAT is a big deal. So, for some reason, I don't know why, summer of 9th grade, I decided to take the SAT early. Now, there are so many reasons why this is a terrible idea. For number one, I don't have enough math. Number two, I haven't been in school long enough to even take the test legally. But I decided to show up anyway. And they sit me down. And when I get up my 6 pencils, my 7 erasers, my 7 backup pencils, this big, tall senior with a mullet sits down next to me with this big cup of coffee. And next to the cup, he's got a pot. Not just a cup, but he has a pot of coffee there, fresh and boiling. And he sits next to me and says, "You want some coffee?" And I'm just confused. I think I ignore him at the time, just focus on filling in my name and the bubbles and the sheets. And he keeps offering me coffee, and I just keep holding my hands up like, oh, this guy's ridiculous. And when the test starts, I'm sitting down, starting English, and he just starts making this little tapping sound like this. You know, at first I just try to focus on reading the passages, but it just keeps getting louder and louder. And I'm like, what's this guy doing? Like, the mullet, the giant height, I think he's got a leather jacket on too. And I realize he's trying to signal his friends on the other side of the room during the test. This is at his high school over a mission, so I guess he has friends in the classroom or whatever. And they're not happy with it either. They're super pissed that he's making this noise because they want to score well too. So they're like, shut up, shut up, shut up, and he takes that as more code. So he just keeps tapping and tapping and tapping. So I don't get much done during the first section, so I confront him in the hallway afterwards. I'm like, okay, you got to stop making this noise. I'm trying to take the test. And he's like, whatever, the next section is math. I don't care. I got a perfect score last time. I'm just going to sleep. So for the next section, get this, he puts his head down and sleeps. And during the first 15 minutes, I assume he's faking, but after about an hour, he starts to snore.
And this is a long section. This is like an hour and a half plus. So this guy's actually asleep in the testing center. So, I mean, this isn't a problem for me. I'm happy that he's not talking. So I'm just filling out the test and filling out the test. And then when things are over, the proctor comes by and collects our booklets, right? And she's passing by me. I give her the booklet. She passes by the guy's friends. They give the booklet. But when she passes by the mullet guy, he's not awake. So she taps him on the shoulder. And when he wakes up, he makes this big gesture. He pops up. And his hand knocks over the pot of coffee. And it spills all over the test. The entire thing is just garbage. And he looks up and he makes this sad little puppy dog face. Kind of like this. And that face was probably the happiest moment I've ever had. Seeing his test soggy on the ground. That's my SAT story. Thanks. Okay, so the workshop's going to be on storytelling. And storytelling is not at all like public speaking. It's much less about information. It's more about entertainment. It's a lot more like acting than presentations. So today I'm going to focus on three things. I'm going to focus on plot. I'm going to focus on details. And then I'm going to focus on a satisfying conclusion or a meaning. Because those are the three really big things you need for a great story. So the first activity I'm going to do is I'm going to do a kid's story, Puss in Boots. And I'm going to read you a really simple version. And I'm going to edit the plot. I'm going to cut it down to make it simpler and shorter. And then after I'm done, you guys can take turns reading it and then making sure you pick up on all the plot points. So when I go through this reading, just try to pick up on the plot and decide which ones you want to keep and which ones you don't. Because after I'm done, you're going to tell me a shorter version. All right, cool? We're good?
Yeah.
All right. You guys heard the story of Puss in Boots before, right?
Don't recall that.
Never? This is some sad childhood. Yes? Okay, good.
Yeah, but I don't
Exciting.
remember it.
Yeah. It's actually one of my favorites because the message is just so simple and so relevant. So let's just dive into it. So once upon a time, there was a farmer, and he had 3 sons. Like any proud dad, he could go on for hours about the first 2. There was the eldest, who was strong as an ox. He could move bushels and really helped around the farm. The second one was really clever. He could count the bushels and brought them to market. And then there was the third son, John. John really didn't do very much. He made songs up about bushels and dreamed about marrying princesses. Why couldn't John be more like his brothers? Now, one day the farmer goes to get payment for his wheat. He ends up at this castle, this mean old ogre. And for some reason, the ogre doesn't feel like paying, so he just eats the dad. Now, the family's real torn up until they realize that the dad left everything to the first 2 sons. The house, the money, the farm. But he didn't leave anything to John. All John gets is a cat and a little pair of boots. Now, John isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. So he decides to put the cat in the boots. Now, for whatever reason, destiny, karma, who knows, when the cat steps in the boots, it can think. It can talk, it can scheme, it can sing. This cat names itself Puss. Now, he doesn't want to live with some stupid farmer for the rest of his life, so he hatches a plan. The next day, he goes out into the forest and catches 2 nice, fresh rabbits. He brings these rabbits before the king and says, "These are a gift from my master, the Duke of Carabas." The king doesn't know who the Duke of Carabas is, and there is no Duke of Carabas. The cat just made it up. But the king is really impressed with the boots and likes Puss, and he wants to learn more about the Duke. Puss brings gifts like this every day for the next few weeks, and the king just gets more curious and more curious and more curious. He really wants to know who this Duke is. Now, one day, Puss is visiting the castle, and he notices a princess sitting up all by herself. And just like John, she's singing songs about bushels. He gets an idea. So, the next day, Puss shows up to John and says, "John, I'm going to need you to take off all your clothes and bathe in the river. Don't ask why, just do it." Now, John doesn't really know what to say to this, but he does it. His cat told him to. Like I said before, John's a bit of a scrub. So when the next day, the king passes by in his carriage, right? And he knows the cat pretty well. So when he's passing by, the cat says, "Stop! My master, the Duke of Carabas, has been robbed. All his clothes have been taken. He's out by the river." So the king is like, "Oh my god, the Duke of Carabas, I know this guy. He's this big rich guy who's been sending me these rabbits. I want to know more about him." So he passes by John and says, "Oh my god, this kid's been robbed. This is the Duke." So he sets him up in a nice, fresh suit and brings him into the carriage. Little does he know, the princess is right there, and the two really hit it off. They sing songs about bushels, they even compose a little duo, and the king had been having some real trouble marrying his daughter off, and this looks like a perfect match. He doesn't know anything about the kid, but he hears good things. I mean, he's brought some rabbits, right? So a few weeks later, the king decides to sign off on the marriage, and John marries into royalty. He doesn't have a castle or any money, but the Duke doesn't know that. And Puss lives the rest of his life in comfort and happiness. He has all the mice he can eat, and it was all due to one small pair of boots. The end. So I have a copy right here of the full story. It's pretty long. There's actually a whole section about ogres that I cut out. And there's an intro, a conflict, an action, and a resolution. This is the action section. Now, there are 3 different parts to the action. In the original story, Puss confronts the ogre and ends up killing him. But I cut that bit out. And that's the thing about storytelling, is you don't have to tell the whole thing. You just need to tell the relevant details to have a satisfying conclusion or a meaning. Now, what do you guys think the meaning of this story is? Like the message or the moral. I would say something like first impressions count, or maybe dress well. What do you guys think?
I think things aren't, almost the opposite, that things aren't what they seem. He got this cat in boots, which seemed like nothing when it got him married into royalty.
Don't prejudge.
Yes. So I want to tell that in this story, right? So I only need to pick the relevant parts of the action that will accomplish that. So I chose to cut out the ogre bit because that wasn't relevant to my meaning. And I'm going to pass the story around, and you guys can take a look at what parts you want to keep and what parts you want to cut. I included a lot about the father and the 2 sons in the beginning. You don't need that necessarily. You can cut that out too. Just try to focus on what parts of the plot you want to keep and which ones you don't. And this can be anywhere between like 20 seconds to 30. It doesn't have to be long.
So each person was like a different section? Is that...
Or each person would just do the retelling of the story. Because, I mean, a lot of times we hear stories on the fly, we love them, but we don't have time to tell the whole thing.
Yeah.
Especially when they don't happen to us personally, we're retelling something from someone else. It's really great to be able to pick certain points of plot that we want to keep. I think in the most popular version, Puss ends up finding the ogre and then tricking him into turning into a mouse and then killing him somehow. And that bit always confused me, just because it was so strange and so out of place. I don't know if you guys have heard that version before. I used to work at a camp and I tell these stories all the time.
Who wrote this story?
This was like a really, really old German folktale before it became like Puss in Boots. Like this has been around for like ages, like the idea. I think the original one was a Grimm one, though.
I was gonna say,
Grimm,
was it
Tale of
Grimm's?
Grimm.
Yeah,
Something in that
Brothers
era.
Grimm.
yeah.
So that's why it has the Grimm parts
Mhm.
out.
It's a little different because rather than having your traditional hero princess setup, you've got sort of an anti-hero. I mean, John really isn't much of anything, and the Puss is kind of a charlatan. So it's a fun story that way.
Sounds like Donald Trump.
Dawn and Boots. Okay, anybody want to start out giving a really quick summary?
Summary of the story?
Summary of the story. Just give a retelling and a
Like
quick
a summary or
Go
just
for it.
like
A retelling.
Actual retelling?
a retelling.
No.
Right, here we go. I'm going to time you. You're a brave soul.
Oh, I'm a volunteer?
Slash
Okay,
victim. All right, here we go.
Once there was this guy named John. He had this cat. John was a very, I'm just going to make it up what I don't remember. He was kind of a poor farmer, and he really didn't want to be poor anymore, but wasn't very bright. But his cat was. His cat was like a genius cat. Actually, he had these boots. And when the cat put these boots on, he became like a cat in the hat type, brilliant level Einstein cat. So anyways, the cat starts plotting, how can I make it so that I'm fed for the rest of my life? I gotta help John, because he's like a human, and to interact with humans, we need human help. So I'm gonna help John become rich or famous or something. So what the cat starts doing is taking food that he catches in the forest, taking it to the king. And the king loves it. He's like, this cat, he's a wonderful cat. He just comes here and brings food. It's like, wow, that's insane. And then one day, as the king is going along with his wagon or his carriage, he's taking a stroll, and he hears this screaming sound, and he goes to the river, and there's this guy in the river. He's swimming, and he's almost drowning. And the king, he says, "Guards, help that man out of the river." And they drag him out, and he says, "Who are you? What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm the Duke of Carabas."
Carabas.
Okay, Carabas.
Good memory.
And I just wanted to go for a swim, but this current it's insane. And the king's like, "Yeah, I know. This is my river. What are you doing in it?" But oh wait, you're the Duke of Carabas. I've heard of you. And he's like, they start talking a little, and he's like, "Well, if you're a duke, it's okay. It's no big deal. It's just a river." And they start talking, and the king has the daughter there, the princess, and he introduces her. They just hit it off like right away, and before long, they're engaged to be married. And all of this was kind of coordinated by this cat, this Puss in Boots. So I think that'd be a better test of my memory than.
That was really good. Yeah, that was really, really good. What I loved about your
It
story is
changed a lot.
yeah, I mean that's great though. I mean you threw in a lot of great details. You caught like the essence, like the moral was the same, the meaning was the same, and that was really good. Like I loved how you would change voice too. Like you change your vocal register when talking. Like you give the king's voice would be different than John's voice, which is really great too. And you also threw in a lot of great sensory details, which is actually the next activity we're going to do. So I love that story. That's a really great retelling. Anybody else want to?
I'll try.
Awesome.
All right. So.
Don't be intimidated by the camera.
No, I just wanted to wait. Okay, so there was once this miller, and he had 3 sons, and 2 of the sons he was very proud of. One was really strong, the other one was really intelligent, and he had a 3rd son who was sort of a daydreamer that he kind of wasn't too sure how he would turn out. And in a somewhat freak accident, the father ended up getting killed, and he had left a lot of his remaining belongings to his first 2 sons, the more capable ones. And he left his 3rd son, the daydreamer, a cat and a pair of boots. And the actual thing about the cat was this cat was surprisingly really brilliant when he put on these boots. And the cat was devising this strategy to ensure that he was well taken care of throughout the rest of his life. So one of his strategies was to impress the king, and he would bring the king gifts every day, and the king got to know the cat and was impressed by the cat, and the cat would tell the king that these gifts were from a duke, which was that 3rd son, and the cat then devised a plan to get these 2 to meet one another. So he had the 3rd son go into the river one day. He told him he needed to remove his clothes, and the son trusted the cat, so he did that. And when the king happened to be coming by with his wagon, he hatched a story that the king had been robbed, and he was bathing in the river, so he shouldn't go there. And when he went, having heard so much about this duke, he offered to give him clothing, and conveniently enough, the king had his beautiful daughter with him when this happened. Of course, the cat knew that would be happening, and the 2 hit it off once the so-called duke met this daughter, and they went off to live happily ever after. The 3rd son married into wealth, and of course the cat reaped the benefits of that arrangement.
Great. Yeah, that was really good too. I love what you did about how you cut out useless details. Like instead of including the bit about the ogre, you just said freak accident and got right to the point. That was awesome. I also loved how you included more sensory details again, beautiful princess, and then also you added that bit about John trusting the cat, which was good too. It changes a little bit with each telling, which is something about storytelling that's always going to be different.
Well, I realized I totally forgot to connect why the cat was taking the food, and
Yeah, I mean, you don't have
This
to.
is
I mean, that's what's so great. It can
random
change.
detail now.
It can change and still be really fun. Like both the versions are really awesome. Yours was a little different. His was a little different, but they were both really good.
I want to say he has a better memory than me.
I mean,
I got to hear yours, though.
True. True. Yeah, and I mean, most stories get better. Like, I mean, the great storytellers we hear about, like, they tell these, they only have like 3 or 4 really good stories, but they just know them really, really well, and they're really polished. So when they give them, it sounds like they're telling them on the spot, but they've been doing this for ages. So how about we do one more telling, just to see what a 3rd one sounds like? Victim / volunteer, Richard /
Well, my telling, I'd say that John is the creative one, and that actually it's all a figment of his imagination. He made up all this in his mind. There was no such thing as a fantastic magical cat or boots. there was just his own imagination. And he wasn't a practical person, but he used his mind, his imagination to think of creativity, think of ways to deal with life. So he became a fiction writer, a storyteller in his own right. And that's how he connected with his own ideas, his own creativity. And that was more powerful than his sons who inherit property or goods. He has the intellectual and creative abilities. And I think that's the most powerful aspect of the story. And once you release your mind, you can do anything you want to. And to me, that's the essence of storytelling, and my story and his.
That's awesome. You know, I loved how you changed the moral at the end. You added your own, which might have even been better than the original, if I dare say. Yeah, that was really cool. So that's another thing you can do, is that the story revolves around the moral or the satisfied conclusion. So in the end, it just matters that you deliver a meaning. And Richard changed the plot, but he had a meaning in mind, and he came around to a really great conclusion. And that was just really amazing. Okay, so the next activity I'm thinking about showing.
For certain parts, you're not exactly sure where he's going, but then he'll tie it into where he's going. So we'll talk about E, he's talking about a few things, and you're like, how does this relate to fame? And then he'll tie it in.
Yeah.
Make sure he always connects the dots along the way. Doesn't let it get too far off.
Definitely. You know, what I like the most is I think that Will brings really high energy to the story. He's never bored, he's never slow, he's always having fun with it.
Yeah.
Which is something that I think is really important for good storytelling. And just charisma in general. Like, he's a really charismatic guy because he's always happy, he's always up all the time. Which is really important for storytelling. And that's sort of why it's almost more acting than it is public speaking, because you're not trying to get information across, you're trying to get emotions across, which is really great. So the last thing, I'm going to have us all pick 3 stories from our own lives that we can tell. Because the truth about storytelling is you only need 3 really good stories. Because remember how we had Puss in Boots, right? And we all found sort of different morals to that story. And we could even sort of twist it around. Like, Richard changed it to be about being creative. I talked about appearances being important. The rest of us talked about, okay, appearances can be deceiving, right? So a story can have multiple different meanings depending on how you frame it. So if you just have 3 really fun stories, 3 really interesting things that you remember well in your life, you can make them about anything, and people will love them. At parties, weddings, whenever, you only really need 3 good stories. So I challenge you guys right now to think of some 3 really funny stories, just really interesting moments in your life that you can tell stories about. And then afterwards, we're going to try to brainstorm which ones work, which ones don't, and practice a little bit. Think of it like table topics, just from our own lives. All right, so I'm going to set a timer for a minute.
He's back on fire, got my rims and my drop top spinning. Cool story, bro. House worth more than $1 million. Cool story, bro. Girl hotter than Jessica Simpson. Cool story, bro. This the hardest thing you heard in a minute. Cool story, bro. Yeah, I'm working out too. I said I train insane, like Goku, homie. I said I'm training insane. No, but you